Hello and welcome to today's lesson on the economy and society in classical China. Now, there are two pictures here that I want you to take note of. The first one on the left, which represents a bit of the labor-intensive community in the social hierarchy of classical China. There were very skilled labor that was needed during this time period. Although it was primarily an agricultural society, there were still very specific skills needed for that. The one on the right, it represents more of the upper class, those that were the land aristocrats that owned lots of land, but also hired a lot of folks, both for their own personal service as well as to maintain their lands. Now, we're going to go ahead and continue here to the rest of our section um, related to the social hierarchy. As you can see here from this social hierarchy pyramid, 2% of the population were the landowning aristocrats and those that were educated bureaucrats. Bureaucrats, again, are those that worked in government primarily to either serve the emperor, the landlords, or other high officials in a variety of capacities. Now, 98% of the population in classical China, including those that were working extremely hard physically, the peasants, as well as other labor which related to farming. And those that actually were the artisans that lived in the large cities, producing and manufacturing a variety of things. Now, at the very bottom, you would have the mean people. Those were the unskilled, or at least skills that weren't deemed necessarily as important in society at this time. And also, interesting enough, the performing artists themselves, people that would perform for the 2%. So the folks down here that perform for the 2% up here, they were actually seen as part of that bottom pole of the social hierarchy here. So it was a very interesting situation happening here in China during the classical time period. Now, as far as trading was concerned, China, of course, had the Silk Roads. The Silk Roads wasn't a one particular road, but a variety of roads that connected Eastern Asia to that of South Asia and India, as well as places like Persia, Arabia, and then getting into places like Rome and Africa. So the Silk Roads was a variety of networks, and some of the main things that were actually traded included silks, jewelry, leather, goods, furniture, rice, wheat, a variety of things coming into China, going this way from west to east, and also from east to west, things like silk and some of the jewelries, things of that sort. Now, during this time period, interesting enough, though, Confucius thought that merchants themselves were not necessarily part of that 2%. They were part of the labor merchant class that didn't necessarily represent the highest class. So merchants, although they were making money and trading goods throughout the different dynasties of classical China, they were not highly regarded as you would the bureaucrats that worked for a variety of the different types of dynasties. Now, technology itself did increase during the Han Dynasty, but also prior to that, during the Shin Dynasty, during this classical time period. But during the Han itself, that's where you would have things like the invention of paper, about the year 100 CE, where you would have a variety of ways to um, have the paper developed, which will require a lot of skilled workers, whether they were either cooking, cleaning, beating, making the paper itself, pressing it, drying it. This required a lot of work and it required natural resources. So this gives us a little insight into the sophistication of the Chinese during this particular time period. Now, along with this, you would also have other developments such as the calendar, which was calculated at 365.25 days. Now, also, since this was a agricultural society primarily during this time period, the iron plow along with the new yoke increased farming output. The yoke itself you can see on the right hand side, whereas the one on the left here represents the calendar itself. The calendar was primarily based on agricultural seasonal needs of the folks, of the people during this time period, and the yoke itself was a way to make sure that the ox were actually able to help out the farmers, but yet not put much pressure on their throats there, and necks so they could carry a big load but yet be safe for them as well. So this was really huge improvements throughout classical China. And lastly, here you have China that remained primarily, as I was mentioning, agricultural. They did have a variety of other technological advances, but mostly the society as a whole remained agricultural, meaning most of people's jobs, livelihood depended on farming, on taking care of animals, of also being part of a village or some type of aristocratic land society where there was a few wealthy folks that owned the land and the rest of the folks kind of lived there, were provided shelter for their labor, for taking care of the rice paddies, for taking care of the animals, for taking care of and maintaining the houses and the structures in Chinese villages. So that's just a little bit on classical China and the economy. Hope you enjoyed this. Once again, thank you for watching. This has been sponsored by Mr. Perez Ramon's Learning Studios.